Okay, quick rhetorical question to start us off. Has your name ever gotten called in front of everybody? Teacher picks you to answer. Coach puts you in the game. I ask you to pray. And your very first move was to duck, and all of a sudden, your shoes and the ground becomes very interesting, right? Hold on to that feeling. I'm sure all of us have experienced it. So hold on to that feeling, because that's basically the origin story of Israel's first king, Saul. I think the last time we went through the book of Judges, the last time was like maybe a month and a half ago, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you remember from last time, Israel asked God for a king, and they're done being led by judges and prophets. And because they can't always see them, right? They were working behind the scenes a lot of the times and all those things. And they wanted to step up to the front. They wanted somebody that they can point to, somebody that looks the part. And God gave them exactly what they wanted. And his name was Saul. He's tall. The text says that he stood head and shoulders above everybody else. He's what you would imagine if you imagine a person who's a king. So the day comes. All of Israel gathers together to meet their new king. Everybody's there, and this is the moment. Now Samuel calls on Saul's name. But if you just glance through the verses before our main verse, you see that there is no response when they call out to Saul's name. So the people ask God, "Is Saul even here?" And God's answer might actually be my favorite line in this whole story, because it's basically a one-liner joke. God tells them he is hiding among the luggage, right? Think about that for a sec. The tallest, most impressive looking man in Israel, a guy who he himself was handpicked, anointed, and given supernatural proof that he was going to be king, is currently curled up behind a pile of bags, hoping that nobody finds it. Now, because of the story of David, right? We all know the story of David and Goliath, and we grew up with all these stories, right? And David is the main character in all of those stories. And because of that, we often portray Saul as only evil. But here, he's not an evil guy yet. He's called, he's chosen, he's being given everything he needs, and his first move as a king is to hide. That's why this story is for us tonight. I'd imagine that most of us aren't getting asked to rule a nation. Well, I'm not sure if you guys are. I mean, I don't know if you guys will end up being president of the United States. But anyways, but every single person in this room knows what it feels like to get picked for something, and they did not want to get picked for that thing and wanted to run the other way. So here's a real question we need to ask ourselves tonight. What do you do when what God's asking of you feels greater than what you believe about yourself? So point number one is this, and I want us to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 9, right? And then I just want us to glance through as we're going through the story together. So let's back up and see how Saul even got here. Saul's story doesn't start on a throne. It actually starts with donkeys. His dad's donkeys wanders off into the wilderness, and Saul gets sent to find the donkeys. That's the assignment, right? The assignment is not go and become a king, go rule this place, go attack that place, or whatever. It is hurry up and go find the donkeys. So Saul and his servant walk and walk and walk. And they search town after town, and they come up empty. Saul's ready to give up and head home before his dad starts worrying about him. It's actually the servant, it's not Saul but his servant, who suggests, "Hey, there's a man of God in the next town. Let's ask him." Saul almost misses the moment because he's tired, discouraged, and thinking about the donkeys. So meanwhile, And this part I love. God's been planning this whole thing already. He told Samuel the day before, right? God told Samuel the day before. Tomorrow, about this time, I'm sending you a man from Benjamin. Anoint him. He's the one who is going to lead the people of Israel. While Saul thinks he's on a donkey hunt, right? God is running a main quest line that Saul himself doesn't know he has gotten himself into yet. Actually, he never got himself into it, that God got him into. So Samuel now meets Saul like an honored guest, and he does something wild. He takes out a flask of oil, anoints his head, and tells him that God has chosen him to be, and here's the word in the original language, a Nagid, right? Nagid, we usually translate that original language into prince or leader, but the word itself actually means something closer to one who goes out to the front, right? The one who goes out to the front lines. Not a guy who sits on a throne and orders people around. A guy who leads from the front, who drags and carries his team. First person to face the danger, into responsibility. Saul is not being handed a crown to enjoy. He's being handed a spot in the front of the line, still answering to God as a king. Then Saul tells him something bigger is coming, right? Signs to prove that this is real. And in verse 9, God is going to give Saul another heart. Now, what comes to mind when we think about another heart, right? So we need to do a quick clarification here because it matters. It's not the same thing as getting saved, right? And then you have a change of heart. This is not some sort of New Testament, like new birth, being born again kind of change of heart. This is God equipping Saul with exactly what he needs for the job that's in front of it. It's courage, clarity, and direction. Think of it as God handing Saul the toolkit for the task he's about to walk into. And it works. God's spirit comes on Saul and he starts prophesying with a group of prophets, so much so that people who've known him his whole life go, wait, is this Saul? That Saul? Since when? Something is genuinely different about this Saul. Like, here's what I want you guys to catch. Saul is not hunting for a calling. He was hunting for donkeys. God met him in the most boring and possibly, right, if you're on a quest to find whatever you've lost, right? It's annoying, right? So this is possibly not only boring, but the most annoying part of his week. And God turned it into the doorway to everything that came next. And that's how God works in us too. You're not going to wake up on a random Monday morning with a neon sign on your head. You're going to be doing your homework. If you work, you're going to be on your shift or showing up to a youth group, even though you didn't feel like it tonight. And God is going to meet you right there. In the boring part, in the annoying part, in your mundane lives. Maybe it's being asked to help with something that you didn't really want to do, and it turns out that someone really needed exactly the kind of person that you are. Maybe it's the group chat where the only one who actually responds when someone says something that's wrong. So don't wait for some sort of dramatic moment to start being faithful to God. Saul's first assignment was the donkeys, right? To hunt the donkeys down. Yours might be a group project nobody else wants to lead, or a friend who needs you to actually listen, or showing up when it's easier not to show up. But, and this is important, being called doesn't automatically mean that you will feel ready when you're called. Saul was genuinely really chosen by God, but he was also very shy, and he was hiding behind a bunch of luggage. And he was genuinely terrified. Both of these things can be true at once. Right? You can be called by God and still not be sure about yourself. And remember, it's not about being sure in yourself. It's about being sure in God, who has chosen you to do that task. Okay, let's move on. So when we go to 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 17 to 24, here's where we catch back up where we started on our main text tonight. So Samuel calls all of Israel together to a place called Mizpah for the public reveal. Before he gets the good news, he says something that probably made the whole crowd go quiet. He says this. He says, "You, being the people of Israel, rejected God as your king today by asking God for a human one instead." That's a pretty heavy way to open a coronation ceremony, right? Then they do this by lot. Anybody know what a lot is? It's where you like put a bunch of names into a hat and pull out a hat, fill out a name, right? But they do this by lot. Basically, it's an ancient way of saying we are going to let God point to the guy and nobody can say that it was raped, right? So the tribe of Benjamin is written, and then the clan is written, and then the clan is picked, and then finally Saul, the son of Kish, is picked. Now Saul is nowhere to be found, and they call his name into a crowd of thousands and still no response. So they ask God directly, is Saul even here? And God says the line that we already talked about. He's hiding amongst the baggage. Now before we get too hard on Saul, let's be fair to him just for a second. Being told out of nowhere that you're about to lead an entire nation would terrify anyone. Now he's not like an American president who like goes and gets votes. Right? He was just chosen out of nowhere. I don't think Saul is hiding because he's a coward down to the bone, right? I think he's afraid because he's just a normal person, just like you and me, that's handed something enormous, right? Imagine like God told me, "Hey, Benny, you're gonna be the like not even the king of a country, right?" Imagine like God appears to me tomorrow and says, "Benny, you're going to be the mayor of Dallas tomorrow," right? That's gonna be crazy. Like, I wouldn't know what to do, and I personally would not want to take that job because, I mean, even if it's God directly talking to me in that way, I'd be like, well, I'm not ready. I've got to mentally prepare myself, right? So, just like any of us would be scared, Saul is scared. But here's what's worth sitting with. This isn't Saul's first warning that he had something like this was coming. Samuel had already anointed him privately. He had already told Saul about the signs that would happen, and he'd already seen the signs happen in front of him, right? So he was prophesying all these things, just as God promised. God's Spirit had already shown up and changed something in him, and Saul had more proof than anyone in history that God was serious about this. And Saul still hid. And that's the line I really want us to find and define tonight, because it's very easy to blur. There's a difference between humility and insecurity, right? And humility and insecurity can look identical from the outside. Humility says, yes, I don't think I'm enough, but God is, so I will go. Insecurity says, I don't think I'm enough, so I'm not gonna go. One of those moves you forward, and the other one lands you behind the luggage. And I want to point out something that's almost funny, if it wasn't so serious. Israel wanted a king instead of God because they wanted something that they could see and something that they could control, something that made them feel less dependent on God. And what did they get? A king that is so afraid he's invisible and he's hiding until God personally reveals where he's hiding. Right? In the exact moment that they're trying hardest to be self-sufficient, they still need God to do the one thing that they were trying to avoid needing. right? Isn't that funny? They're basically telling God, we really want this person, this brave guy who's gonna lead this nation, and then the guy's hiding, right? That's the irony of this whole story. There's also a piece of backstory where that most people miss, right? Saul's fear makes more sense if you know this. Saul's hometown, Gibeah, is the same town where I explained this a little bit in passing when we were going through the book of Judges. It's one of the darkest chapter in the whole book, right? A chapter that's like, it's like so ugly that it kicked off a civil war between the Benjamites and the whole Israelites. And basically what happened was there was a guy, there was a Benjamite who did some inappropriate things to a girl and killed the servant girl. So the owner of the servant girl chopped her body up into different pieces and sent it all over Israel and into the 12 tribes. And then the 12 tribes were shocked, and so they went to Benjamites and they were explain what happened, and they basically got into a fight. And then so Israel was like, okay, we're gonna get rid of this tribe altogether. So that happens in the book of Judges. Sorry, that was a little bit explicit, but that's what happens. So it kicked off a civil war that nearly wiped Saul's entire tribe off of the map. Saul grew up in the shadow of his own tribe's worst moment. Some of what he's carrying into the baggage pile might not just be about being a king. Right? We all have traumas growing up. We all have insecurities growing up. It might be the weight of history that he never asked to inherit. And I don't know what that weight is like. And neither will any of us know what that weight is like. But think of it like this. You know that feeling right before tryouts? Right? Before you have that determine the relationship conversation, or before you finally send that text apologizing to somebody that you wronged, and avoiding it for 3 days before you actually do it. Think of that little voice going in your head that says, what if you mess this up? Right? That's the baggage pile talking. And sometimes the safest move is just not to do that thing, not to show up, not to raise the hand. Leave the message on read forever. Now, I'm not saying that you should take this as a sign to ask a person out, right? Ask a person who you have a crush on out. I'm not trying to give this as a sign that you should do that or whatever. But I wanted to describe the feeling that you get when you are feeling insecure. It feels like protection, but it's really just a well-decorated hiding spot. So let me ask you the question this passage is actually asking us. What is your baggage pile? What are you hiding behind? Maybe it's fear of embarrassing yourself in front of people whose opinion matters way too much to you. Maybe it's a label that somebody handed you a long time ago that you decided was true. Maybe it's simply, what if I try and it doesn't work? Maybe if we're honest, it's your phone. Scrolling is a really good hiding place for all of us, is it not? So here's the good news behind this hard moment though. God didn't leave Saul in the baggage. The people go and get him. And even though Saul is scared out of his mind, God is not finished with Saul yet. So point number 3 that I want to make is this. Calling becomes courage when God's Spirit moves. And this is taken from chapter 11, verse 1 to 15. So 1 Samuel. So Saul goes home after he is made king. And check out what he's doing. Verse 5 finds him walking in from the field behind his oxen. He's king now, but he's still doing chores around the house. Right? He's not ruling over anybody. Then the word comes in fast. A guy named Nasha, king of the Ammonites, has surrounded a town called Jabesh Gilead, and he's not just threatening to attack. right? He says he's only going to spare the city if he gets to gouge out the right eye of every man in Israel to humiliate them. The people of Jabesh send out a desperate call for help, not knowing Israel technically has a king now. I think this is the best part of this, the best detail about this whole storyline that's sort of hidden away. So Jabesh Gilead is not some random town to Saul. Generations earlier, after that brutal civil war that I talked to you guys about just now, that nearly wiped out Saul's own tribe of Benjamin, it was the women of Jabesh Gilead who were given as wives to the people of Benjamites to keep them from disappearing off of the map completely. There's a real chance of some of Saul's family, maybe even his own grandmothers, came from that exact same town, because people used to marry between their own tribes a lot of the times. So when messengers show up to Saul's hometown crying, this is not just the national emergency to him. It might be something that's personal to Saul. It might be about his own family's survival one generation later. So when Saul hears the news, something that happens that looks nothing like the baggage pile, the spirit of the Lord rushes on him. That's the actual word in the same language later for David. And he burns with anger. Not fear this time, righteous anger. Righteous, ready to move anger. So what does Saul do? He grabs a pair of oxen and he cuts them into 12 pieces and he sends it out across Israel to show up and fight, or the same thing that happened to this oxen is going to happen to you. Does that remind you of a story that I shared earlier about that woman whose body was cut into 12 parts and sent out to the Israelites? So clearly, Saul heard that story growing up, and what people meant for evil, right? Remember what Joseph said to his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, right? So he heard this horrifying story growing up. He uses that same technique in that scene in the darkest book of the book of Judges, the very story that started the civil war, that almost struck out Saul's own tribe altogether. Saul takes the most horrifying image from his hometown's history and uses it this time to call people together as one nation instead of tearing them apart into a civil war. Same method, completely different heart behind it. And it works. All of Israel shows up. They crush the Ammonite army and Jabesh Gilead is saved. Notice what changed and what did not. Saul didn't suddenly become naturally fearless person overnight. He's the same guy who's hiding behind the luggage a couple of chapters ago. What changed is that God's spirit moved in him and he stopped hiding and started moving. Maybe you've had a moment like that, really scared, but you did the right thing anyway because it mattered more than the fear did. You might have sat with a kid that nobody sits with, told your parents the truth, even though you know you get into trouble for it. That's not the absence of fear. That is overcoming fear with the help of the Holy Spirit moving you past that fear. And after the win, some people in the crowd want payback for the guys who doubted Saul earlier. Now, you think that's Saul, right? If somebody really doubted you and was making fun of you and actually saying like, we need to get rid of this guy, right? And you're the king, you'd actually like want to execute those people or that have some sort of consequence. But he actually hands the whole win straight back to God. And he says, the Lord has worked salvation on Israel. Courage was never about Saul suddenly not being scared anymore. Courage was about Saul obeying the moment it actually mattered, scared or not. And when it worked, he didn't grab the mic and take credit for it. He gave it all to God. Let's put this whole thing together. Saul was called by God. It wasn't fake. It was not accidental. He was really called. He was anointed and he was equipped. Saul was publicly chosen in front of the entire nations. Saul hid because his calling felt bigger than what he believed about himself and what God can do through him. And when the moment actually mattered, God's Spirit moved him from hiding to courage, and a city was saved, and a whole country, in fact, was saved because of it. Here's a sentence I once stuck in your head walking out of here tonight. Calling without surrendered trust becomes insecurity. But insecurity surrendered to God becomes courage. Let me repeat that. Calling, if you have a calling in your life, without surrendered trust becomes insecurity. But if you have insecurities, but if you surrender those insecurities, but insecurity surrendered to God becomes courage. I want to be honest with you about something before we close, because this story doesn't end here, right? Saul had all of these things. The anointing, the new heart, the Spirit rushing on him actually rescued a whole city. But in the end, we know how the story ends for Saul, right? And we'll talk about that next week. But here's the good news for you and me. If you know Jesus, your story doesn't end on Saul's rules. Back then, the Spirit would come on someone for a job and then could leave. Today, if you belong to Jesus, His Spirit doesn't visit. He moves in to our hearts and He stays. You're not holding on to something that could slip away after one bad decision in your life. You've got someone living inside who is not going anywhere. So, what is your baggage pile right now? What are you hiding behind? Is it scrolling on your phone? Is it your relationship? Whatever it is. You need to think about those things, and you need to think about instead stepping out into what God has already put in front of you. Is it a fear of failing publicly? A label from your past that you never actually questioned? Feeling too young, too awkward, too much of a mess, or not spiritual enough to matter? God probably isn't asking you to save a city or a country tonight, but He might be asking you to take that one step out of the behind the banks, to send the text that you've been avoiding, to apologize to a person you hurt, to raise your hand and ask for help. Tell someone the truth about how you are actually doing. God does not call us to hide behind our insecurity. God calls us to step out in His strength.